We set up the Acronym Institute really in order to report when governments negotiate. I had been an activist for many, many years in the 80s, and I saw how when you were an activism at some places like Greenham Common, what you also needed to do was to influence the governments to get round a table and negotiate a treaty that would actually eliminate the weapons that we were trying to get rid of. It wasn't going to happen physically by us, it was going to happen through a treaty. After we got the INF Treaty in 1987 that got rid of cruise missiles and Pershings and SS-20s from Europe, I turned my attention to banning nuclear weapons testing. And, we'd heard about the horrific humanitarian consequences of that for people in the Pacific, the Marshall Islands, Australia, Kazakhstan, for example, and Nevada, for that matter, and Utah, that we felt that the nuclear testing should be banned, both for disarmament and environmental purposes. So I worked on that for Greenpeace and other organisations as an activist. And when we got the governments to sit in the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva and start negotiating a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty that was called the CTBT, I felt that at least one of us ought to go there and monitor what they were doing and report on it and alert civil society so that people back in the capitals of the nuclear armed states could hold their governments accountable. So I went to Geneva on a shoestring initially, and I started sending out emails. I was talking to the scientists who were doing verification and the diplomats who were doing the negotiations. And I was trying to put it all together. And nowadays that would be called blogging. But in those days I was sending these emails out. And they were peppered with acronyms, CTBT and, NSA and just PNE here and, HNE somewhere else and all these sorts of things. And they acted as a sort of barrier to ordinary people understanding what the governments were saying and doing. So I spelled them out every time and I tried to explain them in ways that wouldn't be a barrier. So I, as a joke, called my emails acro emails or acronym emails. And in 1996, when the treaty was being concluded, funders actually offered to enable me to establish an organisation that would allow us to do this, not just for nuclear weapons, but for biological weapons and, fissile materials and other kinds of negotiations. And so I set it up, I set up an institute with a sensible name like sort of, Disarmament Intelligence. And everybody just said, well, but your acronym. So in the end, I gave in to the inevitable and established the organisation as the Acronym Institute for Disarmament Diplomacy. And at that time, we also set up a journal called Disarmament Diplomacy that initially went out every month and kept going until 2009 when finally, we couldn't raise the money for it, so it had to stop.